A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, good evening, magandang umaga po, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon, magandang gabi. Welcome to the Chronicles, and this is Rita Gadi together with one of the brightest, one of the handsomest, one of the most brilliant, one of the out-of-box thinking from everywhere. He's actually going to come to us from outer space in a way, because we're now going to talk about what is the other side of the archipelago, the Philippine Rice and the South China Sea. Welcome to our program, Sir Butch PICHAY. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Rita. And of course, to our viewers all over the world, I'm sure they're listening to your program because they want to know the history, not only of the political landscape of the Philippines, but the history itself of the Philippines. And
Exactly.
there
Yes,
is one person who is more knowledgeable. That's Rita Gadi in her Chronicles.
Hindi naman. We have taken down notes over the years of so many things happening from the time that islands have been discovered. Ang dami-daming pangalan yan. Merong Spratly, merong Ayungin, meron yung mga nahanap ni Cloma. So many things, and we're referring to the South China Sea. And that's why the title of our program is, Sir Butch, Sea of Hope. Kasi parang ang dami-dami nang nakialam dyan. Ang dami-dami ng mga, well, I don't want to call them kibitzers, but we have all sorts of so-called experts. And they talk about this, and they do their own measurements, they make their own conclusions. But then, of course, for the sake of our listeners and our viewers, we are approaching the South China Sea from a completely different perspective, and that is from Sir Butch PICHAY.
I'm not a historian, but I will try to use my common sense.
Exactly, that's the most important. If we go by history, naku, Sir Butch, ano ba yan? Yan yung tinatawag na China Lake a long, long time ago. If we go by history, well, one of the earliest civilizations really is China. So kung talagang sasabihin nila na yan ang nakamapa nila, but at that time, they were not really charting the South China Sea. They had sampans. Nagtitrading lang sila papunta-punta dito sa atin. Kaya ang dami-daming libingan dito noon ng mga Chinese cemeteries. Doon nga tayo nakahukay ng mga porcelana. Kaya natin nalaman na one of the last dynasties pala sa China, bit-bit nila yung mga plato, yung mga jars, yung mga vase, lahat yan. So ganun nakatagal. Anyway, ngayon pinag-aawayan yung lugar na yan. Ang daming mga interesado. Kaya tingnan natin, ang ating presidente, matapang din ang kanyang salita. Butch, not 1 inch of our territory will be given to anyone. O mga ganon, di ba? Pero that is water everywhere, but how do we claim, di ba? So what is it?
Well, in the same manner that we will also ask that question, how will China claim?
Or Malaysia, yeah, or Vietnam, oo, lahat sila.
Kung balikan natin yung history,
okay.
I think the Chinese were already seafarers during the Song Dynasty. That was 960.
Oh.
960 AD. Imagine mo, 960 AD. Pumunta rito si Magellan, 1500, no? Pa. And they were already seafarers. The first boat that were built by China were not naval vessels, but they were actually trading vessels.
Yes.
Nature talaga ng mga Chinese, negosyante. They were trading vessels. And again, baka makalimutan natin, Rita, remember the most famous pirate, Lima Hong.
Of course, yeah. He built a canal dun sa Pangasinan to escape. Kaya nagkaroon Lima Hong Channel.
Exactly.
Kasi, hanggang ngayon, andyan pa yan. Kasi hindi niya alam kung saan magtatago. Si Lima
So,
Hong.
basing on that history, as early as 960, kalat na yung mga Inchik.
Yeah, all over.
Kalat na sila. And they were already all over
Our islands.
Asia.
Oo.
Will not say all over the world because they were not able to circumnavigate because the first circumnavigation was done by a Portuguese, Magellan, Columbus. But Columbus did not even circumnavigate.
No,
He
nandun lang
only
siya
went to
sa
the
Americas.
Americas.
Oo, right.
But it was Magellan who was able to circumnavigate. Pero pinatay siya ni Lapu-Lapu kaya hindi nakabalik sa Spain. But his vessel was able to go back to Spain. So, ito yung mga given. Bakit ang pangalan niya ay South China Sea or China Sea? There should be a historical basis for that.
Very good.
Yes. Nagiging Philippine Sea yan, na pwede tayo makipag-away. Sabihin nila, pangalan lang China Sea. That means amin yan. But talking about what you were saying about BBM saying not an inch, I would agree with him. Because actually, the Chinese are not also trying to claim what is our territory. And our territory is from the shoreline, that's 12 nautical miles from our shoreline. So the Chinese are not even claiming that. However, they're claiming islands in the exclusive economic zone. Anong ibig sabihin ng exclusive economic zone? Ang ibig sabihin ng exclusive economic zone is that as far as the marine resources is concerned, that is first 12 kilometers from the shoreline, that's our territory. And then you have another 24 miles maritime jurisdiction yan. And then you have the 200 nautical miles, which is the exclusive economic zone. Ang ibig sabihin lang yan is we have the sovereign right, not sovereignty, sovereign right to be able to explore, exploit, and conserve the marine resources. Yan ang ibig sabihin yan.
Yun. So kaya pinagkakaguluhan, sovereign rights and sovereignty. So those are two different things altogether.
So different animals yan.
Pero actually, ang nagkakagulo dyan kasi nga there is an area there, well, over the past so many years, marami na talagang mga islands na tinutukan lang at saka ginawa na rin mga military installations ng China. So I think kasabwat din ang mga Pilipino at sometime kasi kumuha sila ng lupa from Zambales, from Palawan, yun ang nag-reclaim sila. Oo, di ba?
Hindi naman siguro totoo yun. Yung from Zambales, these are nickel ore na diretso sa China. But nire-reclaim nila yan using mga huge, tawag nito, huge equipment. Talagang sinasaksyon nila yung dagat kasi hindi naman may kalaliman. But that is actually a violation because it is not an island. Those are not islands. When it is not inhabitable and the area is only an atoll, then that's not an island. You cannot claim that as your territory, nor shall you build an island, artificial island, say, oh, this is our territory, because that is still within our sovereign, exclusive economic zone. We have the sovereign rights to that. Now, ang ibig sabihin naman ng sovereign right?
Oo. But that's exactly what they did.
So, ang ibig sabihin ng sovereign right, Rita, na yung sovereign right, hindi rin naman absolute.
That's
ibig
right.
sabihin, but like for example, fishing, you have to report, which we have not done, to a certain commission in the United Nations. You have to report na ito yung volume na gusto naming ipangisda doon sa exclusive economic zone namin. At pag na-exhaust na natin yan, another country can ask permission from the Philippines na pwede bang mangisda kami? Total, naubos na nyo yung naubos na nyo yung quota nyo, baka pwede naman kami naman. So, yan yung mga ibig sabihin yan, Rita.
So actually, we do not have an exact measurement of that entire area known as the South China Sea, right? So you only have, sabi mga islets, atolls, rocks, etc. na ginawang ni-reclaim, tapos ginawang island, artificial islands, etc. Pero nilagyan din ng military installations. Be that as it may, China yan. Marami rin mga ibang bansa na nagke-claim dyan. Of course, malakas lang ang propaganda na nangyayari tungkol sa China sapagkat meron ding isang malaking bansa na may interest din dyan. Ayaw nila na ang China magpuposisyon dyan. But then we have to understand that over the years, lumaki na lumaki ang China. That's the front door of China. That's where they pass if they have to sell their products. That sabi mo nga, nung unang panahon, mga 7th century, nagbebenta na sila from the mainland. But eventually, malalaking barko na to sell their products kasi naging progressive na sila. And that is also the passageway for them to get products outside. Pinaka-importante dyan is oil. Yun ang mahalaga dyan. So yan ang kanilang parang front door. Okay.
Okay.
Pero marami ring other countries, Vietnam. Hindi masyadong lumalabas ang publicity niyan, pero ilang Chinese vessels na rin ang nilubog niyan. You have Indonesia, you have Malaysia, you have Brunei, and then up north, you have Taiwan. So, maraming claimants dyan sa South China Sea na yan. Hindi natin pa nagkaroon ng measurement exactly. Yung sinasabi mo nga, maybe in certain area, pwede mangisda, tapos other countries pwedeng sumali. So walang mga demarcation, tawag nito, walang demarcation latitude, longitude para malaman talaga saan pwede, saan hindi pwede.
Meron yan sa exclusive economic zone from Philippine territory to exclusive economic zone. May demarcation yan. May demarcation yan. And we do not just have enough vessel to patrol na, oy, bawal kayong manghuli yan. Now, pagdating doon sa claim ng Vietnam, meron silang legal basis yan. Because actually, it was the French who colonized Vietnam and at the same time, those islands. Kasama yung island na yon. Kaya, we are not complaining about Vietnam because yung Vietnam may legal basis yun. And even China recognizes that. Yung mga islands na kiname ng Vietnam, unang kiname yan ng French. At documented kasi yung pag-claim ng French. Now, as far as the islands na pinag-aawayan natin, walang documents to show na atin yan, kanila yan. Yan ang problema.
Exactly. If we go by, as you said, historically, yung sa pagbenta ng Spain sa Amerika, yung Treaty of Paris, hindi tayo kasali, hindi rin kasali yung mga lugar na yan. Nagkaroon sila ng sa San Francisco, hindi rin sinama yung mga islands na yan. So kailan nangyari na nagkaroon tayo ng interest diyan na kasama yan doon sa sinasabi mo ngang sovereign rights over these islands?
Ang sovereign rights sa marine lang, hindi kasama yung islands.
Okay.
So the sovereign right is for the exploration, for the exploitation, and for the preservation of marine resources. Hindi kasama yung islands. Actually, hindi kasama yung island. Okay. Alam mo yung mga shoal kasi na yan, very rich in marine resources. Kaya since we have the rights to the marine resources, sinasama na natin yung mga island. Ay, yung mga shoal. Sinasama na natin yan kasi doon talaga nangingisda yung mga kababayan natin sa Ayungin Shoal. Ang daming isda kasi doon. Pag pumasok ka na sa shoal, malaking area yon eh. So pwede kang mangisda doon na safe ka dahil hindi malalaki yung alon. But truth of the matter is, yung sovereign rights natin does not include the sovereignty of the island. Hindi kasama yon.
Na pwedeng lagyan natin ng titulo.
Hindi kasama yon. So ngayon, if you were to ask me, anong gagawin natin? Ay di sabihin na lang natin sa Chinese, pwede ba pag-usapan na lang natin yan? Kasi unang-una, wala ka naman document except the history that in 600 AD, 960 AD, during the time of the Song Dynasty, you were already traversing the sea, the South China Sea. Plus the fact na pwede mo naman sabihin, kaya nga tawag niyan South China Sea dahil amin yan eh. Alam nga naman, alam mo, iyo yan, hindi naman sa inyo yan dahil South China Sea yan.
But anyway, ang nangyari kasi, because of that, the natural resources sa lugar na yan, yun ang mahalaga. You will recall, Butch, sometime, was it the last months of President Duterte, I think it was November, December of his last year in office, yung si Secretary Locsin, nagkaroon sila ng parang understanding, if it's not a memorandum of understanding or some kind of an agreement with his counterpart ng China, na magkakaroon ng joint exploration dyan. Sabi mo nga, because of the natural resources, joint exploration sapagkat yung natural gas dun sa Recto Reef nga, yun ang isa daw na pinakamalaking source. But hindi natuloy kasi kinancel. Anong nangyari doon? Sayang sana, sabi mo nga, pwede sanang pag-usapan pero hindi natuloy.
Alam mo, yung sovereign rights na yan, only on marine resources, it does not include what is under the continental shelf. Like oil, under the continental shelf yan eh. So it does not include that. Kaya may nagsasabi unconstitutional kasi if we enter into an agreement with China. That's not true. Because we don't have any sovereign right on what is under the continental shelf. So pwede talaga mag-joint tawag nito
exploration.
Joint venture sa exploration. Ayan ang pwede. Pagkatapos, I think it was during the time of GMA, nagkakaroon tayo ng joint seismic survey. Ayan. Yan yung mga history, Ma'am Rita.
So, but what happened was, hindi natuloy sapagkat nag-elevate ang government sa arbitration committee na hindi naman ni-recognize ng China. I don't know what was going to be arbitrated, so to speak. Kasi parang referee yan gagawin. Pero marami nagkiklaim, ayan, meron ng decision. But how can there be such a decision that will be binding when the other party refused? Refused first, that arbitration committee refused to join and refused the decision.
Actually, the decision, we did not win. And decision, it's just defined.
Exactly.
What is sovereign right?
I think that's very important.
So, walang nanalo doon. It only defined.
Yes.
It made it clearer. It made it clearer. Ngayon, again, iba naman kasi yung joint exploration, like oil joint exploration, iba yon. Wala tayong sovereign right doon sa exclusive economic zone. Ngayon, kung ang joint exploration ay within the 12 miles from the shoreline, then that would be unconstitutional. But outside of the 12 kilometers from the shoreline, we can enter into an agreement with any government for a joint venture.
I think that would be a good solution para hindi na pagkakaguluhan yan. Pag-usapan talaga.
Alam mo, kung tinuloy yun, we would have made a good relationship with China. Instead
Exactly,
ng kaaway-away tayo.
Ni-recognize,
Diba? Ngayon, ang ginagawa natin, nagduduraan tayo ng seawater. Nagkukurutan tayo. Nagduduraan tayo. Sus Maria, napaka-wide ng area na yon. Kung tinuloy yung joint venture, actually, as far as exploration is concerned, that would have been a good start.
Okay, so there are two issues here. Yan, because tawag nito, resources underneath the yung mga atoll and yung mga reef na yan. So those are what resources that we can, as you said, pwede pag-usapan. The other area,
not marine resources. Kasi marine resources, we have that sovereign right. Pero underneath the continental shelves, pwede tayo mag-usap, pwede tayo mag-joint venture with any other country.
Yeah, exactly. Pero yung continental shelf na yan, pumapasok din dyan yung UNCLOS, hindi ba? Sinasabi nga na yung extension, kasi mahaba yan, kagaya sa Philippine rice pala, mahaba yung continental shelf natin doon. In fact, sabi nga ng mga scientists, umaangat pa nga yan. Maybe the next generation, Luzon will be a bigger island precisely because dyan, kaya nga Philippine rice yata ang tawag doon kasi talagang no matter how long it takes, but talagang umaangat. Anyway, that is where, as you said, the continental shelf extends. Kaya pumasok tayo dyan sa UNCLOS, which is supposed to be the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Pero yung Law of the Sea, marami rin ang kailangan ayusin dyan kasi ginamit yan para sa archipelagos, archipelagic theory, etc. Hindi lang para sa Pilipinas, other archipelagos in the world. So, pero kailangan ayusin din sapagkat ang daming interpretation ginagawa dyan sa UNCLOS na yan.
Alam mo, kung talagang gusto mo na ang UNCLOS ay papabor sa iyo, that's another interpretation.
Exactly.
Pero gusto naman natin, pabor natin, there's another interpretation. But if we just have to be very objective, like for example, yung sinatawag natin Benham rice, atin daw yon. But is that within 12 kilometers from the shoreline? If it is within...
Not the shoreline, it's the continental shelf.
That's right. That cannot be our territory. Kasi from the shoreline of Cagayan and Isabela, 12 kilometers, that's our territory.
Yeah, but
sa exclusive economic zone na naman yon.
Oo, pero yung continental shelf, atin yun eh, kasama yon.
Walang ganon, Rita, walang ganon.
Hindi kasama yon.
De,
Oh, yun ang lumalabas.
From the shoreline, 12 kilometers, that is Philippine sovereignty. That's our territory. Beyond that, exclusive economic zone.
Okay, so what happens?
We don't own the rights. We have the right to the marine resources as far as exploration, exploitation, and preservation is concerned.
Okay, so that applies also to the islands beyond the Sulu Archipelago. Di ba? Kasi yon dikit-dikit na doon. Andun din ang Timor-Leste, doon sa Celebes Sea, ang dami ding dikit-dikit na rin yung mga passageway doon.
Alam mo, I have a different theory kasi ng Hulo. Sulu. Sultanate of Sulu. Sultanate of Sulu. Hindi talaga yan kasama sa Bakit tumatawag si Freddy?
No, kanina pa yan
Freddy,
siguro.
tumahimik ka. Yung Sultanate of Sulu is a country in itself. This is ceded during the time of President Macapagal. This is ceded their territory to the Philippines. Ang problema, the secession was brought to the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and then the Secretary of Foreign Affairs submitted it to the President, but the President did not submit it to the Senate to be ratified. So hindi na perfect yung secession. Sultanate of Sulu is actually a country in itself. There are now two sultanates form of government in the world. Number one is Sultanate of Brunei. The other one is Sultanate of Oman. Number three is Sultanate of Sulu. But probably by this time, since they've been voting in the Philippines, they have waived their right to become a country.
To be separate.
That's why even up to now, Malaysia is still paying them.
The British, the British is in this railway system.
Yeah.
Pero meron nga silang kaso dyan, di ba? Malaki yung kanilang makukubra. And also, the problem we have there is there are also nag-branch off na yung pamilya, mandami ng kiram na nagke-claim din dyan. Kaya isa pang malaking problema. But you're correct as far as the Sultanate of Sulu is concerned sapagkat na-recognize ng China yan. In fact, that sultan that started the trade with China is buried there sa Bijou, di ba? Kaya doon maraming bumibisita kasi talagang inadapt ng China yung buong pamilya ng sultan na yon, binigyan ng apelyido na Chinese na An, and and there is the tomb there, or at least the memorial for the Sultan. Anyway, pero mahabang storya din yan sapagkat konektado yan dito sa Brunei. You see, so that is where another problem that we have there, kasi dati sa ating constitution meron yung phrase na and all the other territories which belong to the Philippines by historic right and legal title.
Wala tayo
Parang
niyan.
oo.
Legal right yun ng Sultanate of Sulu, yung Brunei, not the Philippines. So I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not trying to carve a new Philippine territory, but historically, ganun talaga yan. The Sultanate, alam mo, there were two Sultanate in Mindanao. Sultanate of Maguindanao, and then the Sultanate of Sulu. Yung Sultanate of Maguindanao, seceded to the Spanish regime. Under the Spanish, we were still Spanish colony, no? So this is ceded to the King of Spain, and the King of Spain accepted that. So nawala ngayon yung Sultanate of Maguindanao. Ang natira, Sultanate of Sulu. Ay warriors yun eh. Ayaw basta-basta magsisid. Mga warriors yun.
Yeah, we had a war raging there, remember, for the longest time. Kaya ano talaga, yung barrel na anong tawag dito?
45.
Was invented precisely kasi parang hindi lang mapatay-patayan.
In fact, the brother of the Sultan of Sulu went to Brunei, to Borneo para i-claim yun. Kaya lang, they were only a handful of armed men, talagang nasubdued sila ng Malaysian military.
That's a long story.
Mahabang istorya yan. Going back to China, I think we really have, sabi naman ng Secretary Anyo, that kailangan umupo tayo. And I agree with the President, not an inch. Not an inch. Tama yun. Talagang hindi rin naman nakikialam talaga yung Pilipinas sa sovereignty ng ating bansa.
Exactly. That is why, sabi ko nga, imbes na pag-usapan lahat ng gulo na nangyayari dyan, sapagkat ang nanggugulo, yung mga ang dami-daming sinasabi. Itong kailangan gawin, kailangan ganito. But what do you think of all of these movements that are being done? Where you have recently, hindi ba, si Browner pumunta doon, maghahatid ng supplies doon sa isang lugar, tapos winawater cannon sila, tapos sinasabi na, nagigirian, so to speak. Sabi mo nga, para nagduduraan lang or whatever that is. Hindi maganda sapagkat lumalaki. I mean, what's happening is, it is being propagandized in such a way that there is actually now a threat coming from China. But we know very well that China is not an invasive country. But nonetheless, how many hundreds, over 100 diplomatic protests have we filed already, precisely because they're shooing away our vessels that are passing through that area, either to give supplies or to protect our fishermen. So how do you see this?
They should not do that. They should not even harass our fishermen because we have the sovereign right to that area. That's our exclusive economic zone. Hindi naman pwedeng ganun ang gagawa nila, maghaharap.
But they do it.
If they start harassing us, then we need the support of the military talaga. Why? Because we have to police that. Dahil we have to protect our people. Hindi pwede nilang harangin because we have the right to the marine resources in those areas. Pero, in fact, yung area na yan, yung exclusive economic zone, that is free to navigation. Meaning to say, even military vessels can navigate in those areas. Commercial vessels can navigate in those areas. Fishing vessels can navigate in those areas. Basta that's a free, that area is free for navigation, including military vessels.
Yeah, but what do you think of the fact that we are actually now asking the assistance, and we're actually being assisted by the United States of America, Australia joining in, New Zealand, and then you also have Japan also now these are supposedly joint naval exercises, but they're also part of the intent to protect or to help patrol that area where our Philippine vessels are plying. So how does this go? Lalong naiinis ang China kasi ang daming mga bansa na sumasama sa atin para diyan, and they feel that it is actually now being a threat, and that is not very comfortable, to
Okay,
say the least.
we have a mutual defense treaty between the United States of America and the Philippines.
If we are invaded.
Okay. Point is, the Chinese are not going to our sovereign territory. Nandoon lang naman sila sa exclusive economic zone. So we cannot invoke the Americans to come and defend us. But the reason why the Americans are also interested na hindi makontrola ng mga Chinese yung mga ginagawa nilang military installation. First of all, number one, that's illegal. Second, gusto ng China i-control yung passage ng mga vessels doon sa area na yan, which will definitely affect the world trade.
So,
but
are we affected by that? Because free-flowing naman ang mga vessels ng China.
Right now, yes.
Oo.
Right now, yes. If we are not going to do something about it, in the future, they might impose, oh, this is our territory. But you know what?
But that is a supposition, if in the future. But right now, some people look at it as the intrusion of the United States of America and other countries in this particular area, of which ano bang interest nila? Ang layo ng South China Sea sa Amerika, sa Australia, sa New Zealand, ang layo din from Japan kasi andun yan bandang north. You have the Northeast China Sea na hindi naman magulo, So they find it as a threat in a way because you have the hegemon United States of America already there with yung mga malalaking barko niya, military vessels, as a matter of fact.
Alam mo, Rita, for that matter, I agree with you. Meron pa silang mutual defense agreement with Ukraine? Wala naman eh. Pero magkano na naibigay nila doon? 14 billion US dollars. I mean, yeah, more or less.
Kasi kalaban nila ang Russia. Ganito rin yan. Ayaw nila ang China to expand.
Tapos na tayo sa Cold War. But they are anticipating na pag hindi nila i-depensa yung Ukraine, hindi nila tulungan, and Russia will be able to gain control of Ukraine, what will stop Russia from gaining control of the other countries?
Russia doesn't have,
in other words, tinitingnan nila yan na far ahead of time. So ganun din naman dito sa China Sea, tinitingnan din nila, teka muna, if we recognize these islands na kanila yon, what will prevent them in the future from saying...
No, not here in the South China Sea, because Ukraine was part of the ilan ba yan? How many Soviet states, satellite states, were granted their independence, and Ukraine was one of them. The reason why Russia is blocking the entrance of that particular province in Ukraine to enter Russia, kasi yan yung mga yung mga manggugulo talaga. Ayaw ng Russia na yung grupo na yon in that particular province, the Sanks or something, na pumasok sa Russia. But that's applicable to what is happening in Taiwan. Yun ang inaano nila.
Yung Ukraine is already a country. It has its own sovereignty.
Exactly. Nabigay
so
yan.
Wala namang ginagawa ang Ukraine para guluhin yung Russia. In fact,
meron. It started there. No, it started because of that group from that province na gustong pumasok sa sa Russia. That's how it began there, Butch.
Because that is part of their territory, that province. So, like what our president is saying, not a single inch. Doon, province na nga ang gustong mawala eh.
Hindi province.
Yung Crimea.
Tao ang gustong pumasok, yung grupo na yun.
Rita, yung Crimea, gusto ba ng Crimea magiging part of Russia? But it was invaded by Russia. So, ang point ko lang dito is, they don't have a mutual defense treaty, not like the Philippines. We have a mutual defense treaty.
Yes, but the defense
kung
treaty
nakikialam ang Amerika doon, Bakit hindi sila makikialam dito?
Andun ang NATO. Andun ang NATO. You don't need a mutual defense treaty. The NATO is there precisely organized to defend themselves, Europe, against Russia. Anyway, ang layo na
But
natin.
NATO is one and the same with the US to help Ukraine. So that's a NATO action actually, and the US is part of NATO. So point is, dito sa Pilipinas, meron tayong mutual defense treaty, and probably looking forward maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, baka i-impose na yung China, wag kayong dumaan dito dahil territory.
Pero that mutual defense treaty is only in case of invasion, and then they still have to get the approval of their Congress. You know, remember when Marcos spoke before the publishers in New York at one time? Sinabing niya, we have to wait, and we're all gonna die na first before you can have your approval in Congress and then come to defend us. Besides, is there a threat of invasion coming from China? Do you think so?
I don't think so, that there is a threat of invasion. Because as I said, ang invasion naman, pag pumasok na sila sa 12 kilometers na Philippine sovereignty, then that's invasion. Pero kung andun lang sila sa exclusive economic zone, that's not our territory. We only have the right to exploit, to explore.
And that is why China is quite wary of the fact that we have also allowed Americans to establish their military whatever in 11 Philippine bases. So, siyempre, iniisip ng China, para saan yun? You know, a defense of what? A defense of the Philippines against what?
Alam mo, dapat maintindihan ng China kasi meron nga tayong mutual defense treaty. O ano ngayon kung maglalagay ng mga 12 or 13 or 15 or even 40 American bases.
Who is our enemy?
Who is our enemy? Wala tayong enemy, but
so why do we need the bases?
Because if that's what alam mo, ang presidente, siya yung architect ng foreign policy natin. Kung gusto niya, anong magagawa natin? For as long as it was ratified, it will be ratified by the Senate. Ngayon, meron pa ring say ang taong bayan kasi kung ayaw ng Senado, ayaw nilang i-ratify, hindi naman matutuloy.
Pero andyan na yan. It doesn't need ratification. This is just an executive order. Remember that the 5 bases that were organized was just an executive order. It did not need ratification at all. The way this,
yung EDCA,
yeah.
Actually,
ano lang yun? Executive order lang yun. It's between, and it was signed between two, not even two equal officials. It was signed between the ambassador of America and the Secretary of National Defense. Hindi nga National Defense Secretary ng Amerika pa ang pumirma, hindi ambassador lang at saka yung ating secondary. Tagilid talaga yung lamesa whenever it comes to negotiations with the United States of America.
Pwede naman yon kasi these places will not become American bases.
Really?
They're only going to improve these sites using American money. But there is no such thing as the Americans will be staying there.
We are paying for the electricity, for the construction, for the water. Anong American money? Anyway, so that malayo na tayo doon. Let's get back to how can we assist with the foreign policy ideas of all of these people coming up in a way that we can be able to broadcast to the office of the president that this is the way it should go.
Well, this is first thing we have to do is pag-aralan natin yung historical background ng West Philippine Seas. Pag-aralan natin yung UNCLOS because that is actually the law of the sea. Pag-aralan natin na mabuti. Perhaps misunderstood yon. Kasi baka yung iba nagkakamali na yung sovereign right is sovereignty. No, these are two different animals.
Yes.
Yung sovereign rights, ano ba yung sovereign rights natin diyan? Karapatan natin to exploit, to explore, exploit, and preserve marine resources in those areas. That's why it's exclusive economic zone. Pag naintindihan yon, then probably magkakaintindihan tayo ng Chinese. Kahit pa Chinese ang pagsasalita niya, tayo Tagalog, magkakaintindihan tayo.
So how do you think the president is faring? Should he call up Xi Jinping and start talking again? Kasi parang dito sa ambassador or even their Ministry of Defense, napalitan na nga, hindi ba, bago na yung kanilang Secretary of Defense. Kahit na anong sabihin natin, they insist on what they believe in and what they want. So we have to go on a higher level, perhaps as far as dialogue and and conversation is concerned.
Well, totoo yan kasi there are certain violations din naman talaga ng China. Like for example, yung mag-reclaim ka and then put the military installation, that is actually a violation. Baka ayaw naman nila makinig kasi sabihin nila historically, we were already roaming the South China Sea in year 960 AD during the Song Dynasty. Kayo, saan kayo?
But we also cannot remove those installations, even though we don't like them there. We can't remove them. And we cannot ask a foreign country to do that for us, not unless we want America to go to war with China. And sabit tayo dyan, di ba? So, on the level of president to president, what would be the best kind of a dialogue that they could have beyond the ordinary diplomatic protests that we are lodging just about, ano ba yan, almost every time may binawater cannon, protest tayo na protest.
Alam mo Rita, dialogue, usap, dialogue, even if it takes a long time, but continue to dialogue with them. But before you enter into a dialogue with them, mag-aral man yung ating mga negotiator ng UNCLOS at pag-aralan ng mabuti ano ang ibig sabihin ng exclusive economic zone wherein we have sovereign rights vis-a-vis we have sovereignty, which is from the shoreline to 12 kilometers from the shoreline.
Okay, beyond that.
Pag-aralan ng mabuti yan.
Pag-aralan,
and then mag-research din talaga ng history. We have to research on the history.
Yeah, but this is already,
like yun na nga, we were not yet building ships. Yung ating mga balanghay, I don't know kung gaano katagal yun. Balanghay. But the Chinese were already sailing the seas in Asia in year 960 AD. Palagay ko, wala pang population ng Pilipinas noon.
Sabi nga ni I remember the first line of President Marcos on a state visit to the People's Republic of China when we opened diplomatic relations. He acknowledged, sabi niya, we were connected to the mainland by land bridges. O, diba? Kaya nga merong mga ang tawag dito, some of the archaeological findings in the north, mga elephant bones and elephant tusks. So galing yan sa mainland na tumawid. Anyway, but beyond all of this, Butch, we have the ASEAN, 10 member countries. My goodness, we had the commemorative anniversary meeting, etc. and all. Our president attended. Other than that, ilang beses na nagmi-meeting yung ASEAN na yan. Even before this administration, ASEAN na yan ang ASEAN, yung 10 member countries na yan. And they have always come up with, we are now talking about the conduct of the sea. Ilang beses na yan na paikot-ikot dyan. So, ano bang problema at hindi makagawa ng talagang, something that can guide not just the Philippines and China and all of these other islands, shoals, and rocks, but the entire ASEAN region, 10 member countries, a conduct of the sea for the South China Sea.
Well, baka hindi rin naintindihan ng ibang bansa. Yung ibig sabihin ng exclusive economic zone, baka hindi rin nila naintindihan yung UNCLOS. So, there is the United Nations na pwede naman pag-usapan yan doon. You don't have to complain, but probably ask the President of the United Nations to create a committee that will study UNCLOS And instead of fighting, kung hindi, yung UNCLOS na yon ay talagang liwanagin kung ano yung make it black and white para nang sa ganun ay magkakaintindihan lahat ng ating mga bansa. Actually, yung mga island na pinag-aawayan natin, that's actually trust territories. These are trust territories as defined by the United Nations. Anong ibig sabihin ng trust territories? It is island in trust by all nations.
You know,
Trust
but
territories yan.
other than referring everything to the United Nations, it's a very disappointing history that the United Nations has. 75 years, and we still have so many wars. It was organized precisely to keep peace in the world, but look what's happening. Oh, di ba? Yan ang nangyayari. So many wars, and now what's ongoing is the one that's happening in the Middle East, you know, between Israel and the Palestinians. You can imagine all the countries that are now rallying. Ilan yan? Ang dami yan. Over 100 countries throughout the world, condemning even the United Nations for not doing anything about it as far as a ceasefire is concerned, and even the assistance to be given to the Gaza, to the Palestinians. So, referring it again to the United Nations, ay nako, that is why I said we can isolate all of these discussions and debates if ASEAN would have a stronger stand as far as this is concerned. Some time back, we were mentioning the Treaty of Westphalia. I think I've repeated it so many times, where you had 35 countries in Europe fighting over a waterway for 35 years and nagigera-gera because of that river. So if they were able to come up with a peace treaty among themselves, pwede natin gayahin din something to that effect, where the benefit of that river will be for each other. So maybe our president could spearhead this this idea that everybody will be benefiting